Since the update, the Galaxy S24 Ultra has improved massively. Well, 2 updates. But that was also the same of the S23 Ultra from last year with all of those updates that received. So the question is posed, is it finally worth upgrading to the S24 Ultra now after these 2 big updates that have hit it? Daniel here from SamMobile TV, and today I'm here to take a bit of a look at the cameras specifically of the S23 Ultra versus the S24 Ultra. I originally wanted to make this video about a month ago, sort of when the S24 Ultra dropped, but there was all this talk of this update, this camera update dropping. And yes, it eventually did arrive sort of towards the back end of February, and then we quickly got the March update like a few days later. So I wanted to wait until the updates have sort of settled, and then I wanted to put the S23 Ultra against the S24 Ultra and see if there's any difference in the processing of the cameras across a multitude of different areas. So that is what we're going to do. Starting off by looking at the photos and the output of the photos, and then sort of transitioning into videos. And then we're going to take a bit of a look at the difference in the camera modes on the S24 Ultra compared to the S23 Ultra. Let's start with photos. So I went out and took a bunch of photos side by side with the S23 Ultra against the S24 Ultra. Looking back at them on my Viewfinity S9, it's very hard to sort of notice a specific difference. Looking at a lot of different photos, they almost look the same. But across some of the photos, there is some fundamental processing differences between how they handle certain things. Obviously, the S23 Ultra is running the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 for Galaxy, and the S24 Ultra is running the 8 Gen 3 for Galaxy. So with that, brings some different levels of processing, and the ISP will change, even if the cameras themselves and the hardware with 3 of them haven't changed at all. Let's look at some of the differences that I found. With the S24 Ultra, when it first initially launched, it sort of kept the lighter processing from the S23 Ultra and just had a bit of a warmish hue to it, a bit of a warmer tone. That warmer tone is still there across some of the photos, but Samsung with these updates have actually made the processing have a little bit of a darker contrast when it comes to things like the shadow areas and also things like the clouds in the sky. The sky color itself is also a different color, and you can see that when you have the 2 photos next to each other. In some pictures, like this photo of a playground, the foreground areas are a little bit lighter on the S24 Ultra, whereas the back areas of the photo are darker. But again, it was a bit of a back and forth between. It wasn't always the case in some of the photos that I was sort of taking and comparing. What I also noticed too is that in the grass areas of the photos, the grass is processed differently. There's almost like a punchier green on the S23 Ultra in some of the photos I took versus the S24 Ultra, which kind of muted them a little bit. So it's not that it's worse, it's just different, and your preference will come down to which style you like better. When it comes to things like trees, I found that the trees on the S23 Ultra are a little bit like overdone with the brown. It's almost like they were just adding this extra color to it, whereas the S24 Ultra had a little more of the grayish natural tone of what the tree actually was like. So again, depending on what you like, you might like that extra processing that adds in a little bit of color and vibrance versus the pared back sort of more natural tones that the S24 Ultra is giving you in this sort of scenario. Depending on the camera you're taking photos with, the processing kind of then sort of spread themselves apart a little bit more. The S23 Ultra, as you sort of started to zoom in, like 3 and 10, especially on things like trees, it kind of flattened out the color a little bit and washed it out a little bit. The S24 Ultra, what I've noticed with its zoom is it actually processes a little bit more punch in the zoom, and as you go through the zooms, you can actually notice that a little bit more. So again, it's all down to preference about which one you like, but I prefer in the zoom instance that it adds a bit more life back to the photo. We'll compare the detail of zoom a little bit later, but before I get into that, I wanted to sort of look at how the stats of the photos, because I actually found it quite interesting. The ISO, whatever you want to call it, of the photos were different. The S23 Ultra had it at its lowest setting at 10, but the S24 Ultra kept it at 12. Now I don't know why, because the daylight conditions were exactly the same, but they must just have different settings when that sort of environment is on to process things a little bit differently. Sort of segueing into the zoom, there's obvious hardware difference. This is where the 2 devices kind of separate even further. The S23 Ultra is running the 3 times and the 10 times optical setup, whereas the S24 Ultra has got the 3 times and the 5x 50 megapixel setup. Samsung have obviously done something different here in the efforts to try and offer more flexibility. We'll get to that very shortly, but if we're just comparing the 10x and the 10x against each other, you'll notice that the S23 Ultra definitely provides a bit more detail, but you're not losing a lot of detail with the digital crop from the S24 Ultra. It definitely will depend on a keen eye to notice this. Just on face value, you're not going to really see this difference just if you're glancing at the image. You really have to dive a bit deeper to sort of see the difference. Processing wise, as I mentioned, there is a difference. So you will notice that. But in the detail, there's slightly more with the S23 Ultra. That extends out into the 30x as well. The S23 Ultra still has a better 30x range versus the S24 Ultra, barring that processing with the punchier colors on the S24 Ultra as you sort of progress through zooms. But that doesn't complete the picture, because the S24 Ultra gives you a better range of zoom. Going from 5 to 10, you're getting better quality photos in between that range thanks to the 50 megapixel sensor that's both larger and a better aperture, and is cropping in from a higher resolution to the middle 12 megapixel part of whatever zoom you're sort of at. I really like to showcase the 7.5x because it's like the middle ground between 5 and 10. But for the S23 Ultra, it's a long way from that 3x to 7.5x. The 3x does an admirable job of sort of processing. It's like Samsung when they brought in the algorithm that the Fold is using, but the S24 Ultra just handles it better. It's just got more detail, it's sharper, and it's a much more usable, viewable photo thanks to the fact it is cropping in from that 5x versus 3. With the zoom also, the 5x is such a great camera. It can do so many different things, like taking almost telemacro shots to also just giving you really detailed 5x shots compared to 5x on the S23 Ultra. So Samsung have definitely thought about this change. It's not just we'll just slap this in and see how it goes. There is an actual advantage to 5 and 10x and anywhere in between having optical light quality. There was something in photos that I really wanted to test just purely because I saw it on a Twitter account, a really large Twitter account that sort of was complaining about something. The complaint was that the S24 Ultra can't handle bright areas of a building, like a big, large building. And I want to dispute that a little bit because yes, you can see in this specific photo here, the S23 Ultra kind of darkened the color of the building way off in the background, whereas the S24 Ultra kind of kept it light. That's not to say that either one is bad. They're just processing it in different ways. But you can see the difference. It does exist. But when I sort of did it in other areas with buildings, there was actually not that to be found. So maybe it was just an anomaly that in some instances it's not darkening the area of the building that it should or it potentially wants to. Maybe it's misreading it. But in other photos, it did. So side by side, there isn't really that much difference between a lot of these photos that I took, if I'm being honest. Now, portrait photos was something I was really curious about because of the fact that the S24 Ultra has that extra zoom, the 5x, versus just the 1, 2, and 3 on the S23 Ultra. But the processing here was actually vastly different. The S23 Ultra kind of lightened up the face of my daughter quite considerably on all three of the zooms, whereas the S24 Ultra was like this more natural, kept the face, the skin color that she has, like this nice tan olive Italian skin. Yeah, whereas the S23 Ultra kind of didn't do that, which I found a little bit odd. And then of course you've got the flexibility of the 5x, which just gives you portrait photos that the S23 Ultra will never be able to capture. At nighttime, what I really noticed with what Samsung did was they rejigged the nighttime algorithm to not just be bright, but be sort of detailed and sort of accurate. The S23 Ultra, what I noticed with the photos that I took was it just wanted to lift everything. It wanted to brighten the whole picture at cost of accuracy. The S24 Ultra strikes a bit more of a balance. It sort of brings out detail, makes it lighter, but it doesn't do it at the expense of the accuracy of the scene, which I appreciated. Okay, into videos, because the video side of things, there wasn't necessarily that much spoken about in the updates. There was one point made about how videos are more punchier in color now. And yeah, 100%, I agree with that. When you compare the videos next to each other, that same sort of processing of clouds and shadows transfers across. The S23 Ultra favors this lighter processing. The clouds aren't quite as punchy or as detailed, whereas the S24 Ultra, with the updates applied afterwards in March, you can definitely see a bit more definition in the cloud, a bit of a darker shadow area compared to what the S23 Ultra was outputting. No question. Also with video too, the zoom range is an absolute advantage. You can go, again, same as photos, anywhere from pretty much 0.6 to 10 and anywhere in between, and you're going to get very, very capable footage. The S23 Ultra, you pretty much have a couple of stops that you need to go to. 0, 0.6, 1, 2, 3, and 10. The S24 Ultra, 0.6, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And pretty much up to 20 if you really think about it. Whereas the S23 Ultra just doesn't have that advantage. That's not to say it's like the main reason to upgrade, because there are others, but it definitely gives you that flexibility when recording video. I tested the 8K, and the 8K from the S23 Ultra, it suffered from that same flatness that the S23 Ultra always has with 4K video, where it doesn't quite bring to life things like the clouds and the grass and the trees and the detail. Whereas the S24 Ultra with its 8K definitely is bringing that out a lot more. Plus with the S24 Ultra 2, when you consider that it can do this 8K 30 at 1x, you can also then start it at a 5x crop. And it also can produce really stunning video and really high resolution video at sort of different focal lengths, which I really appreciate. And that's another part of the cog in what the S24 Ultra can offer you. Okay, the next part of the comparison is what the actual modes can do. And there's a lot. I did a video here on SamMobile TV looking at 10 upgrades to the camera on the S24 Ultra that no one's really talking about. Pretty much most of them can't be done on the S23 Ultra. I'm going to highlight 3, because I think they're the 3 most important. The first is the change to single take. Samsung made single take have the ability to use any rear camera and any sort of crop from the rear cameras as well. 0.6 all the way through to 10x. The S23 Ultra doesn't have that capability. Now, what remains to be seen is whether Samsung will add that in to the One UI 6.1 update, which is coming soon. But that flexibility with single take now allows you to just go in further without having to move and still capture the moment in its sort of purity without needing to sort of force the scene to happen. The next one is dual recording. I swear this is probably my favorite thing Samsung have done. They removed director's view and replaced it with this. Now the S23 Ultra with its director's view is good. It's actually a really handy feature, but it's really niche and applied in certain situations. Dual recording sort of expands how you can use this type of feature, because not only can you now record it in 4K 30, save it as separate video files, but you can record from 2 rear cameras and 1 in 4K. So you can be at football, for example, and you can want to capture sort of the more context, the wider scene, but also focus more specifically on a particular player that you want to follow around. You can do that. And then later on, when you have both videos on a computer or on your phone, you can layer them, all the audio synced, and you can cut between the different sort of focal ranges to suit the narrative of the story that you're trying to tell. Genius. Absolutely genius. One of my favorites. And the other one, which probably won't come to the S23 Ultra, is the ability to do 4K 120. So in Pro Video mode, you have the option to choose 4K 120 on the S24 Ultra. And what this does, it just gives you that, again, more strings to your bow for the camera, where you can choose this resolution and this frame rate and capture things super fast. And then later on in 4K, slow it down to still 30 frames per second, which is 25% speed, in that higher resolution, which again just adds to what you're able to do and the types of things you're able to capture with the thing that's in your pocket. So that was just a little video we wanted to put together just to show you, after the updates have been done, where the sort of differences will lie, because there is some. And I think with the updates, they have strengthened the camera on the S24 Ultra. Like this video if you are liking what we're doing here at SamMobile TV, and also hit your subscribe button, because that is how you'll be up to date with all the latest in Samsung devices, hands-on impressions, updates. This is the place for it. You can also go find us on our website, sammobile.com. This place is flooded with Samsung news. You'll be truly kept in the loop with everything that's coming ahead of time. So that's another place to go visit. And all of our socials. We're everywhere. Everywhere you have a social media, we're there. So come and find us, SamMobile, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.